Today we are talking about a lady, Wanzhou. Okay, this lady, story of Wanzhou. I don't know whether you realize this from the news. She was detained by the Canadian about 1,000 days ago, and then after 1,000 days of detention, she left Canada and go back to China. So let's talk about this story of her. So it dates back to December the 1st, 2018. Meng was arrested at the Vancouver International Airport. And then about 2 months later, in 2019, January 28th, the United States Department of Justice announced a financial fraud charges against Meng, accusing her of employing a subsidiary to facilitate business activities in Iran in violation of US sanctions. 24th September 2021, the Department of Justice announced that it had reached a deal with Meng to resolve the case through a deferred prosecution agreement. As part of the deal, Meng agreed to a statement of facts, including a statement that he had made untrue statements to HSBC to enable transactions in US, at least some of which supported Huawei's work in Iran, which violated US law, but did not have to pay a fine or plead guilty to her key charges. Meng left Canada for China on 24th September 2021. So it occurred not too long ago, okay? About 3 weeks ago, and Meng returned to China. So in between September 2018 to December 2018 and September 2021 is almost 3 years. So there are a number of questions we want to discuss. Is first of all the sanctions on Iran. US sanction on Iran. That's number one. The second thing is about the untrue statements to HSBC. The HSBC is the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. Okay, it is a British bank. Okay, first of all, about sanctions against Iran. There has been a number of sanctions against Iran imposed by a number of countries, especially United States over time. Okay, on April 2015, P5+1. P5 means the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus 1. I think the 1 is Iran or somebody, reached an agreement which was finalized. The agreement is that the sanctions will be lifted in exchange for Iran's nuclear program to be monitored and stopped by the UN nuclear energy commission. So the UN nuclear commission will monitor Iran's effort in concentrating uranium. We know that uranium itself, the feasible part is a small percentage of the natural uranium. You want to use it as fuel or as weapons, you need to raise the concentration of the feasible uranium nuclei. So that is the main thrust of the agreement. The final agreement was adopted on 2015, October 18. But United States agreed to lift the sanctions in 2016, January 16. But United States never do their part. And on May 8, 2018, President Trump withdrew unilaterally from this nuclear deal. Okay, so United States withdraw from the treaty by itself without renegotiation. Okay, so that is the sanction. Unfortunately the alleged crime occurs before 2015 is in 2013, about 2 years before. About the untrue statement to HSBC, Meng is accused by the US of misrepresenting their case by key information. It involved a meeting with some high-level executives in HSBC. Meng Wanzhou presented her situation by the use of some PowerPoints. And in the PowerPoints, the United States somehow deleted 2 slides, the slide number 6 and the slide number 16. And because the deletion of that 2 slides, United States accused Huawei, the telecom company in China, by not presenting the relationship of a company called Skycom in Iran as the relationship between Huawei and Skycom. Now, Skycom is a subsidiary of Huawei, and in slides number 6 and number 16, Meng Wanzhou has explained that relationship well to the HSBC. And since Huawei have a subsidiary in Iran, and therefore HSBC financing Huawei will be illegal in terms of the US sanctions. And by not telling HSBC that Huawei has Skycom, so Huawei has misled HSBC. But unfortunately, in Meng's presentation, the information were there in slide number 6 and number 16. But when US presented the PowerPoint as a evidence, they deleted that 2 slides. So there's a bit of legal argument there as well. The HSBC documents revealed that an HSBC employee said that Huawei had tried to comply with all sanctions and that he was pretty much reassured on the issue. That document make it clear the HSBC witness B, a managing director, and HSBC employee 7, HSBC deputy head of global banking, has been aware of the relationship between Huawei and Skycom for quite some time before witness B met Meng in 2013. Employee 7 signed off on 4 favorable risk assessment reports that was accepted by the committees weighting the bank's relationship with Huawei. That means this information will directly contradict the accusation from the Department of Justice from the United States. Now, how this information is gathered is that it is by Huawei. Huawei sued HSBC in Hong Kong and demand HSBC to produce this evidence in order to support Meng Wanzhou case. And therefore, this document is obtained legally in Hong Kong. But when it is presented to the Canadian courts, the Associate Chief Justice ruled that these documents cannot be used in the extradition case. Very interesting. So there are some legal anomalies we have identified. why can USA prosecute an employee of a Chinese company for doing business in Iran outside of United States as a violation of United States sanction when such a sanction was the result of United States unilateral withdrawal of an international treaty? Where is the jurisdictions come in? Do United States have jurisdictions for everybody on earth, or United States law can only apply to United States, a crime committed within United States? Can we sue somebody because he committed some crime, some crime somewhere else, not in, for example, we are in Australia here. So somebody in China murdered another one, and that somebody somehow happened to be in Australia. Can we charge that person for murder? I don't think so, because we have no jurisdictions of that person's act in another country, right? Now, this is a business deal. A Chinese company do business with another country, Iran. Okay, US want to sanction Iran. Yes, right. You can sanction it. So you can stop your company, US companies, to do business with Iran. But why you can stop Chinese company to do business with Iran? Now, there's a lot of these questions we need to answer. But let's go into the details first. On that day, December the 1st, 2018, while transferring planes at Vancouver International Airport en route to Mexico from Hong Kong, Meng was arrested by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at the request of the United States, because they have an extradition treaty between Canada and United States. Now, from the international understanding of extradition, okay, we have a criminal, I want a criminal, for example, Australian, who murdered somebody. Okay, we have a warrant on that man. We want to arrest him. Okay, if he go into, say, United States, because we have a treaty with United States, then we will be able to ask the United States, hey, this person is in your territory. Can you arrest him on our behalf and then extradite him to us? Okay. So in order for that to work, there are two conditions. The first condition is the crime committed by this person in Australia, okay? But if that crime is not committed in Australia, but is committed in America, it's still a crime, okay? So for example, if I steal my wife's pen to sign a document, okay? Suppose this is a crime in Australia, but if I arrive in America, if in American, a husband can use a wife's pen to sign a document, it's not a crime, then Australia cannot use this as an excuse to ask American to extradite me back to Australia. Although it is a crime in Australia, but it is not a crime in United States, then you cannot ask for this. So that's number one. The number two is all this extradition treaty always has a cost that if it is political motivated, you cannot extradite some person because of political motivation. So we can now look at two things now. The first of all is the crime committed by Huawei or by Meng Wanzhou. Is that also a crime in Canada? If it is not, then Canada have no right to arrest Meng Wanzhou and extradite her. That's number one. The number two is, if this arrest is that politically motivated. According to the Crown Counsel in Canadian courts, Meng was charged with conspiracy to defraud multiple international institutions. The warrant was based on allegations that Wanzhou had clear money that was claimed to be for Huawei, but was actually for Skycom, an entity claimed to be entirely controlled by Huawei, which is said to be dealing with Iran, contrary to sanctions. Okay, we know that Skycom belongs to Huawei, and Huawei cleared the money for its own subsidiary. How can that be a crime of fraud? And this is meant to deal with Iran. Okay, Iran's come in because of sanctions. So the next question is Canada also a party to the treaty about the sanctions of Iran? No, Canada is not. So Canada, a Canadian doing a business with Iran, shouldn't be sanctioned by United States. So is China. And therefore there's no reason to arrest Meng Wanzhou in the first place. Such allegation was rejected by the Meng's defense lawyer, who claimed she did not break any US or Canadian laws, and that the US has deliberately omitted key information on two PowerPoint slides that had showed that Meng was upfront to HSBC about the true nature of Skycom on Huawei's relationship. Now, that is something Huawei obtained through legal proceedings in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, it was not admitted by the Canadian courts. That's a very strange. The extradition request. Now, under the Canadian Extradition Act, the deadline for the US to request was 60 days after arrest. So that will be 30th January. United States wait until almost the last minute. January 28th, the department confirmed the US has a formal request to the extradition. Okay. Then the Canadian government had until March the 1st to decide whether to authorize the extradition. Okay. And there's another interesting thing is the Minister of Immigration has the right to just reject the US requirement based on political consideration. Obviously, he haven't. On March the 1st, the Department of Justice issued an authority to proceed, which formally commenced an extradition process in the case. So we see that the prosecution tried to take as long as possible. And meanwhile, during this process, Meng is released on bail and had to wear a tracker on her ankles. Let me show you the tracker. She is wearing the tracker on her left ankle. And this tracker has been on there for over 1,000 days. So you can imagine how inconvenient that can be. Okay, eventually on 2019, May 8th, Meng appeared before court. Her legal team claimed the Canadian government is withholding key evidence relevant to how and why Meng was arrested in Vancouver International Airport, which may have been in violation of her constitutional rights at the outset of an American extradition process. Now, Meng is only in transit. The transit area is not considered the area of Canada. It is an international space. And when the Canadian police entered into the international zone to arrest Meng Wanzhou, I think it should oblige by the international law, not by the Canadian law. But that is another issue they have to argue. And the Meng Wanzhou say this is abuse of power. Okay, the defense lawyer described U.S. President Donald Trump suggesting that Meng could be a part of a trade deal with China as intimidation and corrosive of the rule of law. Now, once Donald Trump says something like that, it has become political. And if it is political, then Meng should be released immediately. But unfortunately, it didn't. Okay, months of appearance and submissions, etc., eventually lead to 2019, June 10th. In this particular meeting, Meng wasn't there. Meng's lawyers argued that the alleged fraud level against Meng does not meet the requirements of double criminality, seeing it is based on a breach of U.S. sanctions on Iran, which do not apply in Canada. But they changed the say, oh, this is about fraud, not about sanctions. Okay. And then about fraud, then when the evidence is presented, they reject the evidence, say that the evidence is collected in Hong Kong, not in Canada. And whatever. Okay. On the 20th January the 10th, Canadian Crown prosecutors argued that the court doesn't need to consider U.S. sanction law because Meng's conduct amounts to fraud under Canadian law. Okay, change the accusation. And then on January 20th, the judges asked the defense if a domestic persecution would be viable had Meng's alleged conduct occurred in Canada. Meng's defense answered no, because the bank would face no liability for the alleged fraud. Then the judge questioned whether or not all financial losses the bank must occur in Canada for the fraud to be prosecuted, and suggested that the bank may suffer reputational risk regardless of the location. According to the Attorney General, the matter is not complex. Lying to a bank is a fraud. The Crown Counsel argued that sanctions laws need not be considered to understand the reputation risk Meng's contact posed to HSBC. However, the defense lawyer countered that there must be an actual risk posed to the economic interests of the victim. For example, if somebody says something bad about me, then I can sue the person for libel. But when in that case, I have to present to the court how much damage that bad saying has been to me. If I'm a little guy with no public reputations, then the court will say, okay, you are nobody, and somebody says something bad about you. Sorry, you have no damage, no reward. But if that case happened to a very famous person, then the damage can be huge. Then the fine is much better, much greater. And that is exactly the case here. How much can you quantify the amount of damage HSBC suffered because of this? Some legal commentary. Criminal defense lawyer provides some legal advice. say that Meng's extradition case is silly, obviously a political type or enterprise. Okay, I think I will skip over that and then come to another interesting parallel. So I'll call your attention to this man. And he wrote a book. The title of the book is The American Trap. Okay, so let's talk about his story first and then see the parallel. Now, remember, Meng Wanzhou is held by Canadian. Fortunately, she's very rich. She's able to put in, I think, 30 million Canadian dollars as bail, and she was confined to his to her home. Okay, but this man can't. So this occurred in 2013. This person is a PhD. PhD was invited to a dinner on the 57th floor of a hotel in Singapore by his boss, the then CEO of the French industrial giant Armstrong. Among the executives was the group's general counsel, Carr. Carr and Piaggi, briefly discussed the Parahan case, the investigation in the use of consultants to persuade members of the Indonesian government to buy Armstrong's equipment for use in their power stations. Most in power business knew that these consultants blind officials, but an internal investigation at Armstrong had cleared the man himself of any involvement. As they sipped cocktails over Singapore, the council, the Armstrong's council, told you have absolutely nothing to fear. Okay, but a few weeks later, he flew to New York en route to business trip. He was arrested by FBI agents as he got off the plane and found himself within hours manacled to a wall and under interrogation. Still reeling from shock and jet lag, he was moved to a maximum security prison, and in an overcrowded windowless block in which murder and sexual violence were commonplace, and was told that he faced a maximum sentence of 125 years. What is his crime? Okay, he was charged under the Foreign Corrupt Practice, which allows the Department of Justice to prosecute foreign nationals for crimes, particularly bribery, committed outside its jurisdiction. If a company employs people, trades its shares, or even store its email in the US, the DOJ has grounds to investigate, imprison, and issue huge fines because we use Gmail. The American know that he is not the ringleader. After all, Armstrong's executives was nabbed and DOJ went after the company's leadership. It became evident that his freedom has been the leverage in a deal that in April 2014, just over a year in prison without being sentenced or bailed, he found out that a deal had done from a television, and then immediately after the deal is done, he is released. Now, what is the deal? What is important here? The important thing is France has a model of a state investment in energy supply that the UK can only dream of. After the 1973 oil shock, the country implemented a plan, a huge building program that created 56 nuclear power stations. France has so much cheap nuclear power that it is able to sell it to other countries. 3 million British homes are powered by the French electricity. But in 2014, much of France's nuclear infrastructure, including the generator themselves, becomes American property because Alstom have to sell it to General Electric. This is the book I'm talking about. Here as a co-author, they put together a detailed account of the mechanization that allowed this act of economic warfare to take place. It shows lobbyists making their way easily from the offices of Barack Obama and Malcolm to the GE boardroom. Auditors seeing only what they are paid to see. Retail shareholders watching their investments disappear while the CEO of Armstrong buys his way into energy markets around the world, leaves the company with an unblemished record and pay out more than 12 million euros. Beyond the fact there is corruption everywhere, it is only punished when convenient. This book has something important to say about the world today. While Trump challenges China's industrial dominance with blunt instrument of tariffs, a more subtle and effective trade war has been fought for many years. Under both Republican and Democrat administrations, the US was able to destabilize, as this French executive described, the multinationals of other nations. British, French, Sweden, Russia, German companies paid tens of billions in fine as the US extended its legal jurisdiction around the group. Nor is America the only combatant. Nixon Reynolds was arrested in Japan on financial crime charge, but protests that he is subject of a political motivation, and eventually it doesn't make any sense. Okay, no market history. Okay, and then let's hear what he had to say.
On April 14th, 2013, Frederick Fiorucci's life was forever changed. He was an executive of Alstom, a French power and transportation conglomerate with a happy family and promising future. On that day, he was arrested by the FBI when his plane landed at the John F. Kennedy International Airport for his alleged role in a 2003 to 2004 corruption case involving Alstom in Indonesia. 5 years later, on December 1st, 2018, Meng Wanzhou, CFO of Huawei, China's telecom giant, was arrested at the request of the US on the charge of conspiracy to defraud multiple international institutions. Later, both of them found their arrests are at the heart of a plot where America's judicial power seemed to be intertwined with the business world.
Et ils m'ont arrêté pour faire pression sur le PDG d'Alstom. La menace était que, comme j'avais été arrêté et que j'étais proche de lui, il savait très bien que la prochaine étape, c'était de l'arrêter lui-même. En m'arrêtant, ils ont mis la pression sur lui pour qu'il coopère, et donc pour qu'il accepte de payer une amende qui à l'époque était la plus grosse amende au titre de cette loi payée au Department of Justice, donc plus de 700 millions de dollars. Et ils ont mis la pression sur lui aussi pour qu'il vende 70% de l'entreprise au grand concurrent américain d'Alstom qui était General Electric.
Once a symbol of France's industrial power, Alstom was dismembered by the Americans. The Foreign Corrupt Practice Act was born 1977 as a domestic law to restrict American companies' corrupt practices. But later, the US government found this put US enterprises in a disadvantaged position in overseas competition. Huge efforts were made to make this law international. Any company that has minimal contact with the US comes under the law. This can include using US dollars in contracts and sending an email via an American server. But it looks like the act targets more European companies than American ones. Since it came into effect, of all the 29 companies who paid a penalty of more than dollars based on the act, 15 are from Europe, with only 6 from the US.
I think the US has weaponized American dollar together with the international payment system known as the SWIFT system. Therefore, any company in the world, if it is doing business using US dollars, actually, it is under the supervision of the American authority.
Countries need to fight corrupt practices, but the asymmetry of the way US treats its own companies and foreign ones raises a valid question. How willing is the US to employ its law as a weapon to achieve its political and economic goals? With Washington's global spy network, how many more companies will fall prey to the American trap? The answers to these questions are even more clear in the case of Huawei. The arrest of Meng was woven into a larger plan to crack down on Huawei, a world leader in 5G technology.
The Trump administration is cracking down on Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Now, this effectively is banning it from doing business with American companies.
Companies will now be banned from providing Huawei with chips made using American parts or American design unless they receive special permission from the Commerce Department.
US used this time is its export control regulations. Apparently, if America decides to impose sanctions on Iran, it would not like any other country to do business with the country. Otherwise, it would face secondary sanctions from the US.
Secondary sanction, I think, violates international law. First, it does not have any basis on the jurisdiction of international law. For example, it does not have support by either the territorial jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction. More importantly, it violates the international rule of non-intervention. The rule or the principle of non-intervention is a very important international principle, which is enshrined by UN Charter, according to which every country has a right to conduct affairs without external interference.
The US tried to portray Meng's arrest as a pure legal case, but it was not from the start. According to a report revealed by Canada's spy agency, advanced communication to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service regarding her arrest came from the FBI. Meng's arrest and the issue of Huawei has been quickly used as leverage by the Trump administration in a tit-for-tat trade war that has lasted more than 2 years. By choking Huawei, the US government is weakening Huawei's 5G dominance while making more demands in a China-US trade deal. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has tried many times to unite different countries to join the Huawei ban frontline, claiming Huawei equipment could be used for espionage by the Chinese government. As always, no evidence has ever been offered.
There are a lot of evidence to show that the United States is using law to safeguard its foreign policies and national interests. Nowadays, U.S. regard China as a competitor or a challenger to U.S. interest. Therefore, it uses its long-arm jurisdiction to penalize or to prevent the development of Huawei, which is a high-tech company of China. Although France is an ally of the United States, however, in order to realize its economic interest, the U.S. is not hesitant to use its law to impose sanctions on a French company, although France is an ally.
The curtain has come down on the story of Alstom, but will Huawei become the next Alstom?
J'espère très sincèrement que sur Huawei, ça finira pas comme le cas d'Alstom. Je pense que grosse différence, c'est que, d'après ce que je vois, mais je ne suis pas dans le secret des dieux, mais au moins vous avez, Huawei peut compter sur le support du gouvernement chinois.
Okay. Eventually, Meng arrived home.
Well, as we talk about the two Michaels returning home to Canada, Meng Wanzhou is also back at her home. She left Vancouver shortly after her deal was reached yesterday, arriving at the international airport this morning in Shenzhen, China. Now, she was accompanied by China's ambassador to Canada. And as you can see by the red carpet on that jetway, she was welcomed in a grand style, a crowd of supporters lining the tarmac, welcoming Meng with cheers, music, again, that red carpet. Now, this will be her first time back in the People's Republic since being held in Canada under house arrest. Now, Natalie Collada is watching that side of the story for us today. So, Natalie, let's talk about Meng Wanzhou right now. Like the two Michaels, back at home, in her case, in the People's Republic.
Very much so, Michael. And as you see, to great fanfare, just handed there on your screen, you see there a bouquet of flowers wearing red, symbolic, the color of China, as you can see, waving to individuals as well who were on the tarmac, as you mentioned, waving flags as well. She then took some time to say some prepared remarks. In that, she said she has, quote, finally returned to the warm embrace of the motherland. And then she continued on to say, as an ordinary Chinese citizen going through this difficult time, I always felt the warm concern of the party, the nation, and of course, the people. Now, we also saw and have heard from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. They themselves have put out a statement saying they have been clear and consistent on their position of this whole thing, calling it a political persecution of a Chinese citizen, saying it was an incident, quote, designed to hobble Chinese high-tech companies. And then continue on to say that this is what they call a typical case of arbitrary detention. Now, CBC has also spoken to Lynette Ong. Now, she is associate professor at the University of Toronto to get her take on all of this. Have a listen to what she had to say.
I think from the Chinese perspective, they see that and in this episode, the whole episode has been portrayed as United States bullying China and elbowing Canada into doing that. And they see Ms. Meng has been, has not done anything against the law and is part of this U.S.-China competition that U.S. is ganging up with its ally trying to contain China's growth.
So we will continue to watch and track, Michael, the geopolitical ramifications and fallout of not just this, but of course what happens with the two Michaels, what has happened and how that will influence and affect things going forward.
Now, of course, this began with Meng's arrest at Vancouver International Airport, and this ensued nearly 3 years of legal wrangling and quite concern amongst Canadians for the two Michaels.
That's right. She was arrested back in 2018. She was facing several charges, including wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. This was on behalf of a U.S. extradition order. We can tell you that in a U.S. agreed statement of facts that was released in a U.S. court on Friday, it said that Meng told global financial institutions, and one in particular, that a company operating in Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions was, quote, a local partner of Huawei when it was in fact a subsidiary of Huawei. We also know that the BC court, threw out their extradition case as that deal was reached with the United States. So, Michael, we will continue to watch this as it unfolds.
Okay, Natalie, thank you for that. Our Natalie Collada.
Okay, I have stopped it, and then we can answer some questions and have some discussions. I see a lot that you have mute yourself. That's very good. Thank you very much. And please unmute, and I welcome any question. Sorry, can you speed up?
Were the two Canadians in China kept as sort of hostages to hasten the release?
Yeah, these two Canadians were released on the same day as Meng Wanzhou was released, and they fly back to Canada in a Canadian military plane. Yeah, the two Michaels are released. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other question?
Which countries in the world are using Huawei for their communication systems?
Well, no, we should be using Huawei. My modem here is a Huawei modem as well. Okay, so a lot of countries has been using Huawei, especially in 4G. But in terms of 5G, basically the Western countries are not using Huawei's 5G, and Huawei still is installing 5G equipment in 130 countries. I don't have the list, but obviously out of the almost 200 countries, they are not able to sell to some countries, including Australia. After Meng released, Huawei closed its Canadian branch, and that made about 4,500 people unemployed. And then Huawei also banned Canadian using Huawei's 5G patents. I don't know what's the implication. I understand that in terms of 5G patents, Huawei represent about 30% essential parts of the 5G network. So basically, if Huawei ban Canadian using its patents, that means Canada will not have 5G. Even if they are using equipments other than Huawei's equipment. For example, there are other Ericsson, etc., will be able to provide some 5G equipments, but because of the ban, Ericsson will not be able to install this equipment in Canada. Because Huawei take revenge. After all, Meng Wanzhou is the daughter of the CEO or the founder. So you are just like you are kidnapping your daughter, and she is the daughter of the founder.
So in Australia with 5G, who Telstra are installing it, and Optus and
the other two European companies, the Ericsson and what's the other one, together they can install 5G. Okay, but some of that equipment will use Huawei's patent, and but since Huawei haven't banned Australia from using its patents, so we are able to get 5G equipments. Our government banned Huawei from providing the equipments to us. That means the 5G equipment will be provided by some other companies. That only means we will get the things more expensively, but still we might be able to get 5G. But
thank you.
But not as economical. The situation in 6G is even worse. Huawei at the moment has already got about 40% of the 6G patents, essential patents. So although people are banning Huawei, but Huawei was the #1 mobile phone makers before the ban by United States. It now dropped to 8th position. So this is a significant loss to Huawei. But like any other technology, the US ban on China will only mean the Chinese companies will have to work harder for the next few years. And then when the Chinese catch up, then it spells the end of our European companies, because Chinese typically can do that on a much larger scale at a lower cost. and therefore it will outcompete all the European companies. It's very short-sighted. I think the Western politicians are very short-sighted. If they had allowed cooperation, then the Chinese company will not have the urge to develop the technology. If I can buy it, why develop it? Makes sense. But once you ban it, they discover that I cannot even buy it. Then what can you do? Reinvent it. So once it's completed reinvention, then you have a competition. Originally, I may be the only supplier of that technology. I'm making good money. And then you will buy it, I sell it to you as a handsome profit. But now you are forcing my competitors to try to compete with me. And when they succeed, then I'm in trouble. And that is what's happening at the moment. I think it's a very stupid move by the Western politicians. Our nuclear submarine probably is not a topic for China today. But I think there's another stupid move by our government. We have no skills in managing a nuclear submarine, and it will not be available for at least 20 years. And China is building one submarine every 15 months. I don't know. Anyway, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Albert.
See you next weekend.
Thank you
Yeah.
for your research.
Right.
Thank you, Albert.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.